Ensure justice to queer people. Apex Court shuts down on legalizing same sex marriages. Political class must reset the rules. If there was a semblance of hope for queer people after the Supreme Court had refused to accord legal status to same sex unions 2 years ago, that door was firmly shut on Thursday. A five-judge bench comprising Justices Bhushan R. Gavai, Suryakant B.V. Nagratna, P.S. Narasimha, and Dipankar Datta concluded in chamber proceedings that petitions asked for review of the 2023 Constitution Bench verdict lacked sufficient merit. The bench, which comprised only one judge, who was the part of 2023 judgment, said if it didn't find any error apparent in earlier decision and said no interference was warranted. More importantly, since this was unanimous decision of the five-judge bench that confirmed a 3-2 verdict by the Constitution bench, the possibility of a successful curative petition, the only legal recourse left for the petitioners, appears slim. This is a moment imbued with disappointment, especially for the members of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer communities who continue to battle bias in structural and everyday situations. Their lives uh, hang in bizarre, if extraordinary, liminality. Their existence is legal, but their relationships are not. This means battling bias and helplessness in everyday situations, opening a bank account, admitting a loved one in a hospital, buying a home together, or planning a future together. That the courts and government have chosen to do little to remedy, and the situation is disheartening. Still, as this newspaper has noted before, the world over, the journey from decriminalization of queerness to the recognition of marital rights has been arduous. If successful, India would have been among the quickest to allow same sex marriages. Therefore, granting full marriage rights to the community was always an outlier, especially due to the tangle of secular and faith based laws that regulate marriage, divorce, and inheritance in India. It is in the realm of limited rights akin to the civil union arrangement that is considered a stopgap between decriminalization and marriage rights that immediate progress seemed more realistic. Unfortunately, the progress on that front is far from satisfactory. In 2023, the union government promised to set up a committee headed by the cabinet secretary to investigate these issues, but the progress has been slow and deliberations not wide ranging. As a consequence, a bouquet of rights, the minority judgment in 2023 by the then Chief Justice of India, Dhanarajya Y. Chandrachud and Sanjay Krishan Kaul, had specifically mentioned medical, jail visitation, and financial rights, in addition to questions of succession, maintenance, and pensions, hang in limbo. Even the encouraging moves, some changes in government forms, passport applications, and recognition of transgender people have come after judicial nudges. In many ways, the question of queer rights is one of the litmus tests of modern democracy because these communities don't form a numerical majority. Therefore, fulfilling the promise of dignity and respect made by the Constitution to every citizen, including queer ones, needs authority to rise above myopic consideration and election focused politics. The ball is in the court of political class which populates the executive and legislature. It must do all it can to ensure queer people are not treated like second class citizens in any walk of life. Between the rich and the poor, the middle is stuck. The income tax paying Indian, even smaller fraction that pays a meaningful amount within the already small pool of those filing returns, has become the cash cow for the government. As yet another budget rolls up, the usual expectation of a tax cut has reared its head again among the Indian middle class that continues to seek a cut in the burden that they carry disproportionately for all those who don't. Personal income taxes paid by less than 5% of the total population pull 19% of the almost $45 trillion budget in 2023-24, or just 30% of the total tax revenue, and other half the indirect taxes collected. But other than small tinkering with slabs and rates, Don't expect anything dramatic in this budget of future ones and from this government of future ones. Because if you don't pay, who will? And because you don't vote as a bloc, get ready to keep playing no matter what, no matter who is in the seat of power. There are no alternatives for Middle India. We are the boxers of Animal Farm who will work harder to keep paying for all those who don't. For those who persistently stay out side the tax net, for those who are the recipients of subsidies and state largesse of cash handouts, free electricity, free water, free bus rides, free and more free. For all the Behan Didi, Mahila, Akka, Amma or whatever schemes that are the flavor of the season, but there there is never a free lunch. You and I are disproportionately paying for all this, and in return, other than when a crisis hits, we get subpar government services. So pay. You need to pay for those with free electricity and water. One study puts the direct tariff subsidies from state and union territory government at $1.1 trillion in 2018-19, with cross subsidies adding to another 72,000 crore. This number is likely to be higher, as the report says, and that not all states report their subsidies. With three quarters of subsidies going to agriculture, the rest goes to select focus groups who might vote as a group in urban areas. You need to pay for the farmers, even rich SUV driving ones, who are exempt from income tax. Why you also pay for those who identify as farmers and manage to turn their taxable income into untaxed gains. Recent data is hard to come by, but a study by National Institute of Public Finance and Policy puts the tax revenue foregone of the non-poor farmers at 85,000 crore for 2015-16. At that time, this was 11% of the direct tax base. If we take 11% of the gross direct tax revenue for FY24, that number is upwards of $2.1 trillion today. Pay. Pay for the judiciary that works less than 190 days a year and takes holidays that school children can only dream about. The summer, winter, Dussehra, Diwali, Holi, and other small breaks are, of course, in excess of their annual leave that they are entitled to. Does that have an impact on the justice delivered? Newspaper reports put the number of case backlogs as over 50 million. Pay for the school teachers, doctors, and nurses who you fund to not turn up to work, or if they do, for some of them to not work. Karthik Muralidharan in his book Accelerating India's Development documents his research where he found that around 25% of teachers and 40% of doctors absent on any given day. Another 25% were present but not teaching. He writes, at any given point in time, 50% of government teachers across India were not teaching. Pay for the pensions and medical benefits of those in government service, see them getting inflation adjusted annuities even as you struggle to save half income that is left after all taxes direct and indirect are paid. Your tiny cohort of 5% of Indian population who file income tax return, and even a small fraction that actually pay any meaningful tax on the already small base, are the cash cow of the system. But that is not enough. Pay between 10% to 35% of the project cost of any business you want to do as bribes. Because the salaries and perks are not enough for the state, its agents need more. The gouging countries continues pay higher prices for homes because the cost of corruption adds layers and layers to the final cost of the home in hand. Why do you think rent is a fraction of the EMI in India and not adjacent as in most of the countries? Pay for the parkland accompanied colonial style bungalows in prime locations in capitals of the nations and states for the new masters, the politicians, bureaucrats, and judiciary, while you wait in endless jams on choked roads of urban mess we live in, and then pay for the adorning them with crores worth of TV consoles, bars, curtains, silk carpets, and state of the art gadgets. Pay for the dear departed who looked out to a river view in memorial after memorial while the living commute long distances to work. While the state gets away with not doing its job, you pay for the smallest of infractions like jumping a red light. pay when the municipal local goon comes to examine the cooler for mosquito larvae, doesn't find even a cooler but anyway wants thousand for his troubles. Run a small unit Run a small unit that is legitimate, still pay because the state has the power to harass the life out of you. Taxes are not enough, either a bribe or a fine, pay for it, but ignore the crime of potholed road or stray cattle claimed in the life of a commuter. Whoever heard of making the public master, why use the wrong word here, servant is so untrue accountable. Ignore the state dysfunction or irregular water supply that are anyways not drinkable. Pay for choked sewer, broken roads, and toxic air. Pay. Pay because you don't have the street power to run tractors amok in the capital of the nations, to block roads for months, to riot in the streets for reservations, to vote as a bloc to do a deal with the politician to benefit your narrow slice of population. The good news is that while middle and rich India have begun to vote more than the poor, they are not at all income taxpayers, nor do they vote as a bloc. Dear Indian income taxpayer, you are really on your own no matter which government is in power. Draft rules suggest DPDP Act is a work in progress. The new year indeed brought good tidings with the draft Digital Data Personal Protection Rules 2025 being unveiled. The rules augur possible implementation of Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023 Act shortly. Privacy was and continues to be the fundamental right, but we need the instrumentality of law to ensure the effective enforcement. That which the Justice Puttoswamy judgment of 2017 was finally enacted under the DPDP Act in 2013, but the same could not be implemented for want of rules to enumerate modalities. Now the DPDP rules have opened up for public consultation in January 25. A year and 4 months since DPDP Act was passed, the hope is that DPDP Act will become effective without further delay. With technology permeating every second of our lives, there is deep and constant surveillance of our actions on digital platforms, which results in individuals being targeted and profiled. An enactment that regulates personal data is therefore required to protect the fundamental right of privacy of individuals against government and corporate surveillance, whilst enabling businesses to use the personal data they collect without infringing such privacy rights of a sound personal data law. Therefore lies the balance it brings to protecting our privacy, ease of implementation, and the scope of its application. The DPDP Act was made into a simple, bare bones draft with the promise of ease of implementation and clarity through rules, which were to spell out privacy protections and laid out modalities availing the same. This benchmark appears to be still elusive with the draft rules. The rules ought to not only set out specific modalities for enabling the implementation of DPDP Act, but also enumerate limitations and restrictions that the Act mandates to ensure the effective protection of the rights. The rules under the Consent and Accountability Based DPDP Act spell out modalities for notice, for consent, and consent managers. It elaborates purpose limitations such as personal data of children under the fourth schedule. The rules also make a feeble attempt at laying down modalities for personal data handling by the state, but these lack clarity and specificity. The same rules that explicitly set out category-wise time limitation for e-commerce, online gaming or social media intermediaries fail to enumerate purpose and time limitations or restrictions for the state in the usage of personal data collected. This is critical gap that needs to be addressed. For instance, in 2021, government publicly reported a revenue of about 100 crore from the sale of Vahan and Siddharthi Idea. This was personal data collected by the government to issue vehicle registration and driving license. Data that an individual entrusted to the government in the furtherance of its regulatory function. However, hence restricting such acts through not only purpose limitation but an explicit restraint against exceeding purpose is critical when it comes to personal data collected by state agencies. age gating for children through parental consent and exemptions is well enumerated. However, the illustrations and the minister's public statement indicate the use of both child's and parents' verifiable information to determine age. Given the suggested options for age verification, it is critical to provide protective measures against corporate surveillance and restrain the use of data submitted beyond the purpose, including the deletions upon age verification and restraint profiling. The possibility of data localization by a committee of the Union government was a bit of a googly for technology companies. The clarification that has come up from the ministry in this regard is that such localization is likely to be sectoral and committee may comprise representation from industry. Such specificity include consultation of the meet committee and category of data localization must be captured in the rules to obviate uncertainty. The absence of rules with respect of enforcing penalties do not in any manner dilute the same as has been violated by some. With the Parent Act providing the penalties, the message is clear and unequivocal. The board is likely to set out further modalities that which needs to be addressed in the rules. However, uh, compens- concerns compensation to victims. One aspect that certainly need specificity and clarity in the rules was for explaining the opt-out option for users, that users would not be refused a service merely because they may refuse consent for being tracked or profiled. Such clarity would ensure parity in protections for Indians on par with European Union citizens. Voices that represent the golden era of Romanticism. Within the span of 2 weeks, Malayalam has lost two illustrious artists. One is MT Vasudevan Nair, MTV Vasudevan Nair, who died on Christmas Day, and second is P. Jayachandran, who passed away in 80s, was a singer. So thank you for listening. See you in the next one.